A tough guy cuts through traffic and bursts through the door without hesitation. He goes straight up to a clerk, shoots him, and despite noticing a security camera recording, he leaves without fear. The man is a getaway driver who 10 years ago collaborates with his brother to rob a bank. Later, a rival gang finds them and attempts to steal their money. The driver reveals the location of the hidden cash under the floorboards in the kitchen, but in exchange, his brother is throat slit, and the driver is shot in the head. Miraculously, he survives but is sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, time does not quell his intense desire for revenge, which leads him on a long and difficult path to track down and retaliate against everyone involved in his brother's murder. Throughout those 10 years, this tough guy never stops training, defeats every challenging inmate, and tattoos every victory on his arm. Finally, he is released from prison. The warden gives him some advice before letting him go and hands him a business card in case he runs into trouble outside. But the driver only cares about one thing. W here is the exit. When he steps outside, he throws away the business card and decides to stretch his legs. The driver runs to an abandoned parking lot where a stylish SS is ready for him. The key is placed on the front wheel. The driver lifts the hood and finds all the information cleverly hidden in the glove compartment. He also finds a revolver under the seat. He starts the car without any trouble and successfully takes care of his first enemy. The next scene takes us to a roadside motel, where a man in the bathroom is attempting to buy illegal substances from a drug dealer. He pulls out a crumpled bill from his pocket, but the dealer is not pleased with such a payment. After a brief dispute, the buyer convinces the dealer to make a deal. He returns to his car with the purchased items, returning to the crime scene of the first victim. It's revealed that the person who just bought the contraband is the police officer assigned to the Cassia cop who is only 10 days away from retirement. However, his drug addiction is an open secret at the police department, which severely tarnishes his reputation. Working the case with him is Detective Cicero, who also has a poor impression of him. Disgusted, she throws his cigarette butt into a cup and warns him that smoking is prohibited here. They study the surveillance footage thoroughly, and the case becomes clear. There are numerous clues and video evidence, and the interaction suggests that the parties know each other. It looks like a revenge killing. Soon, an arrest warrant is issued for the driver. That night, the driver drives to a small office. Two men inside are watching a news report about the recent murder of a clerk. As the driver enters, the man sitting behind the desk comments that the driver is a rule breaker. He then demands payment for the vehicle he had arranged for the driver. The driver pays up and asks for the names of the other criminals involved in his brother's murder. The informant, however, states that the cost of information has increased during the decade the driver was imprisoned. It took me 10 whole years to track down these people for you, and it cost a lot of money. Obviously, he decides this after seeing the driver pull out a stack of money. The driver is unhappy with the new pricing policy. To intimidate him, the informant tries to set his bodyguard a champion of Samoan street fighting on the driver. However, upon seeing the tattoos on the driver's arms, the bodyguard immediately backs down. "Brother, I got no beef with you." Panicked, the bodyguard calls the driver a ghost and quickly leaves. The informant becomes more cooperative and even offers the driver some compensation. With the information in hand, the driver immediately locks in on his next target. His high-profile target brings dangers. Someone hires a man named Killer to assassinate the driver. Killer is a young, wealthy man who lives in a luxurious house with his beautiful girlfriend and pays great attention to maintaining his physique. On Killer's wall, there are photos of him, including magazines with his face on the cover, each reflecting his achievements in his career. It's revealed that Killer had leg problems as a child. However, his yoga practice is almost at the level of street dance. He wakes up his girlfriend and talks to her in the backyard, claiming that he has completed his yoga training and now needs more challenging tasks. Though he seems too optimistic for an assassin, he indeed receives a new target over the phone. He hears, "Got a new client for you." Killer receives the driver's photo. Without hesitation, he gets ready with the help of his girlfriend, packs up, picks up a gun, and then drives off in his sports car. Just before leaving, Killer rushes out to give his girl a kiss. Subsequently, Killer talks to his therapist over the phone. He expresses boredom with his missions but lies to her, claiming to be a surgeon specializing in tumor removal. The therapist is skeptical but continues the consultation. Meanwhile, Killer observes a suspicious old man at the police station. Detective Cicero checks the photos of the driver's tattoos. Sergeant Mallory apologizes to her for her police partner but asks her not to interfere with his role in the investigation. After this conversation, Cicero shows cop photos of the driver identified through surveillance cameras and the warden's testimony. Cop laughs upon seeing the driver, revealing that this man made money in prison by smuggling. Cicero tells Cop that the driver was detained 10 years ago for his involvement in a bank robbery and that he was the getaway driver. Then we see the robbery and how the protagonist team cleverly evades police pursuit thanks to the driver's excellent skills, especially his reverse driving. Clearly, the police don't know what to do against such clever maneuvers. We see the old man's apartment that the killer has been observing. The old man doesn't return alone, but with a young woman who has been helping him shop for groceries. He persuades her to stay for a drink. Suddenly, the driver arrives at the location. The killer ends his phone conversation with the therapist and prepares his weapons. He mentions that he plans to propose to his girlfriend, telling the doctor he has stopped taking his medication as he gets out of the car, despite the therapist telling him it's a bad idea. Then he hangs up the phone. Meanwhile, the driver gets out of his car and heads towards the old man's place, follows the driver, and enters through the back door. At the same time, the old man drugs the caregiver's drink, waiting for it to take effect. The scene shifts back to the police station, where we see Cop and Cicero watching a video recorded with an amateur camera. It shows the driver and his brother being held hostage by other thugs. The driver's brother pleads with him not to reveal anything, as it would get them both killed. "Don't tell him, brother." In a bid to save his brother, the driver divulges the location, but as seen at the beginning of the movie, they are still silenced. The driver is shot in the head from behind by an unknown person, but before that, he vows revenge on everyone. The bullet penetrates his head, but in the hospital, he miraculously returns from the brink of death, a metal plate now supporting a skull. A thug questions why they must kill this man, but most don't care. The entire incident was filmed by the old man whom the killer had been watching. The film returns to the driver, who bursts through the old man's door, thwarting his plan. The elderly thug tries to defend himself, claiming he killed the driver's brother under someone else's orders. This excuse doesn't save him. He is shot twice. The driver leaves the terrified girl in the apartment and runs out into the corridor. The killer is already waiting for him there. A girl stepping out of the corridor prevents him from carrying out his task without making noise. The driver shoves the girl into the next room, and a gunfire battle erupts. He doesn't shoot the killer but forces him into a corner. This maneuver buys the driver enough time to escape. The killer tries to track the target but fails. From the window of the old man's apartment, the assassin can only see the smoke rising from the wheels of the driver's Chevrolet as he speeds away. Meanwhile, Cop goes to pick up his son from his ex-wife's house, where she scolds him for being late. He tries to explain that he's involved in a serious case, but she is uninterested in listening. She threatens to take full custody of their son and demands they hurry to the game. On the way, Tommy, the overweight son, confesses he doesn't really like baseball and rarely gets to play. The officer promises Tommy he'll talk to the coach, but then receives a call from Cicero requesting his presence at a crime scene. Disturbed by this, Tommy feels uneasy, but his father pretends everything is handled and decides to stay at the game instead of going to work, trying to win his son's favor. "Taking my son to a baseball game, it's really important that I be there." Eventually, Cop arrives at the scene 2 hours late, facing Cicero's sharp criticism. The murdered old man is found to have been fond of recording indecent videos, and the cop realizes he was the one who filmed the driver's brother being killed. The officers are also aware of the gunfight involving the killer, but they don't know who the second gunman was. In his room, the killer tells his future bride that the target was more challenging than expected. He admires the driver's calmness and fearlessness. Suddenly, he comes up with the idea to propose over the phone and proceeds to do so. His beloved smiles and is about to say yes. The next day, at the police station, Cicero notices a strange tattoo on Cop's arm. It turns out, before his transfer, the cop served on the Los Angeles Homicide Squad, known for its dirty dealings and disreputable behavior. That's where he met his ex-wife Marina, who was his informant. Furthermore, it's revealed that he had previously undergone rehabilitation for addiction problems. The driver, observing his next target through the car window, sees a woman with her son outside their house holding a gun. He decides to pay her a visit. After entering the house, he finds the woman he was looking for. but to his surprise, she is feeding a baby. During their conversation, after a slap, it's revealed that she is not his intended target, but his ex-wife. It turns out that the driver had not allowed her to visit him during his 10-year imprisonment. He mistakenly thought the boy he saw through the window was his son. Unfortunately, he was wrong. The lady has moved on, building a new life for herself and her child. Regrettably, the driver's child never came into this world because the mother chose to have an abortion. Heartbroken upon learning this news, the driver leaves, continuing on his path of vengeance. His former lover tells him she knows what he is doing and wishes him luck. "I hope you kill them all." As this drama unfolds, the killer decides to have a lavish wedding with his fiancée Lily. There are cool race cars, a beautiful ceremony, and of course, the most romantic part of any wedding, shooting at cans. The killer offers his wife a new start in Pasadena and promises to quit his job as a professional assassin. Meanwhile, Cop arrives at Marina's house and enters uninvited. He is surprised to find his ex-wife watching a news report about his case. He proposes they get back together and start a new life, but she refuses, stating she has moved on and built a different life for herself. She is pursuing a degree to improve her and her son's life. Cop tries to persuade her, even handing over his illegal substances and promising to go to rehab. However, he suggests dealing with it after the case is over, he says, hoping to at least spend a day with his ex-wife and son. "I just want to be here with you for one night." She hesitates but does not refuse. Listening to the radio, the driver heads towards his new target. At night, he stops outside a club, finds the right person, and enters. His target is a security guard. The driver catches up with him in the restroom. This is the man who cut his brother's throat. After a brief conversation, the driver tells an old doorman named Joe to leave the restroom and pretend he didn't see anything, regardless of who walks out alive. Following the gentleman's advice, the old man complies. The driver locks the door, and a knife fight ensues. The driver wins the fight, and the killer of his brother apologizes. He also asks the driver to call his son to tell him his father is sorry. The driver completes his last wish in the car, leaving the nearly breathless man on the floor. The father is sorry. The killer sits on the couch, flipping through photos of his life. His expression changes as he looks at pictures of his childhood and his disabled leg, prompting him to reach out and touch his scar. Then he starts frantically cleaning his weapons. Lily notices his behavior. She says hoping her husband would stop, but he decides to finish the job first. "I have to finish this one first, baby." Lily tries to persuade him not to do it, but he is adamant, continuing to wipe his gun. Cop wakes up in bed next to his son, who told him he doesn't like baseball. The father responds that the boy will improve, he just needs more practice. He suggests they play together, mentioning he wasn't good at baseball either. Later, he finds Marina heavily drunk in the bathroom. Marina admits that she fears eventually sinking into the hell they created for each other, always bringing pain and torment. "We're going to hell for what we did." Afterwards, Cop throws the remaining substances in the trash and goes to sleep with Marina. The next day, both Cop and the killer leave their homes in the morning, each wearing a face filled with confusion and worry. Cop receives a call from Cicero, who informs him she's found a clue. Both of the driver's victims were police informants involved in his brother's murder case. She requests Cop to investigate this, but he replies that he needs to speak with a stabbing victim at Henderson, the security guard previously attacked by the driver at a club. Ignoring Cicero's request, Cop heads to the emergency room to conduct his inquiry. He insists firmly after hearing a broadcast news that the stabbed killer is still alive and receiving treatment at the hospital. The driver quickly turns his car around and speeds towards the hospital. Meanwhile, the killer's client also informs him of the driver surviving. Target and suggests he might try to finish the job. Cop is the first to arrive at the clinic. However, the driver wastes no time in his usual manner. He heads straight to the operating room where doctors are trying to save his target's life. Without hesitation, he fires several shots at the man's forehead. Hearing the gunshots, Cop quickly rushes out from the nearby room. He chases the driver until they reach the basement, where a fierce gunfight erupts. Ensues at a critical moment, the driver seizes an opportunity from his opponent's negligence, forcing him to kneel. However, just as Cop closes his eyes, the driver vanishes. The driver gets in his car and drives away. On the road, he receives a call from the son of the man who killed his brother. The boy threatens to avenge his father. The driver tells him that although he must make a choice, he should understand that it will bring consequences. Just then, the killer catches up to him from behind. The dangerous chase doesn't last long. The driver, shot in the neck, manages to shoot out the enemy's tires and escapes into the night. The disheartened killer receives a call from his client, informing him that the mission is canceled. However, determined not to give up easily, the killer refuses to abandon his last job. The driver arrives at his father's house, suspecting his father might have betrayed them after the robbery, but finds only his mother there. "W here is the old man?" The woman lost her husband 3 to 4 years ago. She treats her son's wounds and assures him that her late husband loved Gary deeply and would never betray him. The driver explains that they robbed the bank to pay off Gary's debts, and he volunteers to help because he can't abandon a brother in need. After picking up his brother's ashes, he sets off for his next target, pondering who might frame them. At the police station, Cop tells his partner about his encounter with the driver at the hospital and how he miraculously survives. Everyone around him congratulates him for nearly capturing the criminal. Cicero forgives him for hanging up on her and shows Cop a list of the driver's potential targets. They are all informants who serve minimal sentences for serious crimes. Cop decides to check on those on the list who haven't been attacked by the driver yet. Meanwhile, the driver catches up with his last target on the list, only to find it's an itinerant preacher whom he's been listening to on the radio throughout his journey. The preacher is delivering a sermon in a mobile temple tent. After all the scream upon arrival, the driver waits patiently for the sermon to end, then approaches the preacher. The preacher confesses that he abandoned his wicked ways long ago and is now committed to guiding people onto the right path. During the arrest of the driver and his brother, he was the one who did not want them killed. Before going for a walk, the preacher's wife and children come to visit him, which surprises the driver. Although he does not want to give up his vengeance on the way to the beach, as it would be one of their last walks together, the two start talking. It turns out the preacher is the father of 5 adopted children. He confesses that when Gary was killed, he just had to stand by and watch, making easy money in the process. The preacher is honest about his past actions, but also expresses regret. He mentions that he took his share of the money and then went to prison where he found God. The driver is visibly hesitant, but still orders the preacher to kneel, ready to shoot. In the last moment, he spares the preacher, allowing him to reunite with his family. As he walks back to the temple, the driver finds the killer waiting for him inside the tent, fully armed and ready for a fair fight, seeking recognition for his skills. The driver remains calm, calmly stating that he has no quarrel with the killer. "I've got nothing against you." He also points out that the killer clearly has issues. In response, the killer takes the driver's gun, aims it at his head, and also notices the list by the driver's side. The mercenary says there should be one more person on the list, the one who hired him to kill the driver, but he doesn't reveal the person's name. Meanwhile, Cop, who just arrives, gets out of his car and approaches the temple. He sneaks up behind the driver, orders the killer to drop his weapon, and threatens dire consequences. "Put the gun down." Just as the killer lays down his gun, a gunshot echoes through the air. Cop shoots the driver in the back of the head. It is revealed that Cop is not only the person who hired the killer, but also the one who first tried to eliminate the driver. Cop tells the killer that when he sees the mercenary fail to kill the driver at the old man's apartment, he decides to get involved. The killer shows him the list, pointing out that the driver is completely unaware of Cop's involvement. Cop admits that he realizes everything in the clinic's basement when the driver doesn't shoot him. It turns out, Gary's girlfriend is a detective's informant who exposes the entire gang. Cop's other informants help take away the money that the driver and his accomplice stole. After hearing this thrilling story, the killer leaves the tent, but Cop catches up with him, attempting to pay him for his work. The young man charges only $1 for his services, saying that contract killing is his hobby. However, he refuses the payment because technically he didn't kill the target. In the end, he says he's done. Cicero goes to the crime scene, and on the way, realizes that all the involved informants have the same supervising officer, her partner, Cop. She starts to suspect he might be involved in everything. She calls the department, and her boss tells her Cop was the one who requested to be assigned to this case. He begged for it, then all the pieces come together. Cop calls his ex-wife to tell her the case is over. He feels good, thinking everything will get better. He plans to start anew. "We're going to be fine." But his positive thoughts are interrupted by a gunshot to his back. The steel plate in the driver's head proves tougher than the bullet. The killer returns to his wife. Cicero arrives at the crime scene and discovers Cop's body. The lady has not told her colleagues about his past. At sunset, the driver scatters his brother's ashes over a reservoir and drives towards the horizon. Meanwhile, a pastor enthusiastically talks to his congregation about the importance of forgiveness.